Burning questions.
Insightful answers.
Listener's choice.
With Clement Manyathela.
So, Listener's Choice is an opportunity for you as our listener to co-curate the content of the show with us. We spend a lot of time deciding what we should discuss on the show for your benefit. But Listener's Choice is an opportunity for you to tell us what you would like us to discuss. Because sometimes there are issues we touch on, but not sufficiently. Sometimes there are issues that we miss because we're not always going to talk about everything. So if there are specific issues you want us to discuss, or there's clarity you need, you want us to bring in an expert who can explain something to you, just drop me an email on cm@702.co.za. So today, we've been asked by one of our listeners to discuss the policy issue that's been a source of tension between ICASA and the Minister of Communication, and that's the Equity Equivalence Investment Program, the EEIP. This is a program that allows foreign firms to gain ownership points by investing in training and skills development as well, instead of selling their shares. And it's a program that is part of the Triple BEE initiative, designed specifically for these multinational companies that cannot comply with the standard 25 or 30% black ownership requirement due to their global policies. So just to give you context around the tension before I get to my guest, remember the minister has been saying that he will start legislative amendments that will enable equity equivalence investment programs to complement ownership requirements in telecommunications. But then ICASA has been refusing the minister's directives to recognize equity equivalence without an amendment to the Electronic Communications Act. Remember, the minister had issued that directive, was it in December last year? And ICASA said, no, if you really need that alignment, then there must be changes to the Electronic Communications Act. And the issue here is, if ICASA does that, then that paves the way for Elon Musk's company, Starlink, to operate in South Africa. Because remember, his company said they don't want to give away 30% ownership as per our regulations when it comes to these multinational companies, but they are happy to do equity equivalence investment program. So one of our listeners has asked that we explain what this equity equivalence is all about. Like, does it even deliver meaningful economic benefits, right? Is it an effective alternative to traditional equity ownership? And if you've got some thoughts on this, you can join the conversation by calling us or sending us a WhatsApp voice note. Makwe Masilela is the Chief Investment Officer of Makwe Fund Managers, joining us on the line. Makwe, thank you for making time. Good morning.
Morning, Clement. Thanks for having me, and morning to your listeners.
So how do you define equity equivalence investment program? What does it entail in your understanding?
Basically, if a multinational is strictly, and we have to underline strictly, prohibited by their policies to do the traditional way of selling shares, then they have to opt for that equity equivalent investment. And I'm saying strictly because you've got companies that have got different policies operating internationally. But now, to make up for that instead of me selling my 25% to help you guys readdress the previous imbalances, then I can embark on policies and spend money on stuff that will uplift the very same communities. So if it's not 25% of their revenue, then it becomes almost 4% of their total revenue per annum during the duration of the program. But that program has also have to be approved by the Department of Trade and Industry. So you are making up that instead of selling for us, then let me spend X amount. But if only you are strictly prohibited. And I'm underlying strictly because maybe later we'll have to touch on that.
No, let's touch on it now, because there are other companies that would have maybe also sold just a section of their company, to locals in other countries, but they would refuse to do it here. So in that case, then that they wouldn't be allowed to enter this equity equivalence investment program then, because in other countries they were open enough to consider local ownership.
Definitely. And I think the reason we've had this discussion now is the issue about Starlink.
Yes.
And if we check that who owns Starlink, Elon Musk owns the majority of SpaceX, which owns Starlink. The guy is holding 42% of the company's equity and almost nearly 79% of its voting power. I'm stating that to say he's in charge and he can be able to change any policy without getting approval from other shareholders. So it's something that is doable. So in this instance, he's not strictly prohibited by the policies of SpaceX to be able to do something like that. And maybe also what's important is that how effective those things are versus selling the 25%, the traditional way.
And we'll get to that in a moment. You've said that like selling 25% stake. There's an impression that's been created even by Elon Musk that in South Africa when I come in, they want me to give up 30% of my company to previously disadvantaged people, and the assumption there is you just giving away the 30% or 25% and not so much selling that stake to some local companies, or the people who are previously disadvantaged. Can you help clarify that? So is it more you enter South Africa and 30% of ownership somehow has to be given to, let's say, black or previously disadvantaged people? Or do you have to just sell that percentage of your company so you still make money as a multinational?
You still make money, and it's not giving away anything for free. Guys will run around to try to be your partners. At the same time, they'll run around to try to get funding to be able to acquire that particular stake, whether it's outside funders or you fund it internally. But at the end of the day, there should be a financial transaction. So it's not a charity that they give people 26%. And maybe we have to jog our memory. People who didn't have money to buy stakes, then they were locked for a certain period that whatever dividends the company is paying will use that to repay the debt. And what is that debt for? It was to acquire that particular stake. So there's nothing for free. You don't give away. We buy into the stake, and people will be creative. How do you buy into a company? Getting funding, or the company themselves do vendor funding, whatever form and formula that we have to use, but nothing for free.
Okay. So why then is equity equivalence investment programs not aligned with the regulations that ICASA oversees in the telecommunication space? Because that seems to be what the tension has been. The Minister of Communication says triple BEE codes already provide for equity equivalence, but for some reason in the telecom space, that option or alternative is not provided for.
Yeah, the ICASA Act allows for that, and that's the thing of we know our government at some point we're doing things in silos, and in the sense that different sectors had to derive their own BEE codes, what will make sense to them. We had the issue of the financial sector. Today, as it is now, we know the legal fraternity, they're up and down in courts, fighting this whole issue about BEE in their particular sector. So I think when that sector was negotiating, that is what made sense to them. But yes, unfortunately, it doesn't talk to the broader one. And I think policymakers are right by saying, listen, if you want this to be changed, it can be changed, but it has to be done the right way by changing the act itself. So follow the process, change the act. People will comment around that act, and if it gets to be changed, then let it be changed. It cannot just be a quick kind of a situation.
So how effective then is equity equivalence? Because I've spoken to a few people in the past who have indicated that it's a bit tricky, like even just following on the kind of benefits, it can be a bit sketchy. So do you think that there are more benefits to equity equivalence compared to the direct ownership?
Not necessarily. And I think so far this has been in implementation for the past 19 years. And if I'm not mistaken, the first one was in 2021. Because all they're doing is that we will spend X amount. Let's take a practical example, that they will support me, maybe say for a period of 2 years. And that's all well and good. But if I'm running a business, then I've got commitments and projections, probably which are more than 2 years. I've rented an office, whatever it is. Say for whatever reason, after 2 years, that support stops. Then they expect me to be able to be on my own and try to compete with the other guys who've been in the field for quite some time. And I think depending on what field you're involved in, probably you might be able to do that or you might struggle. Somebody made a simple example that it's like buying a car for 60 months, but now you are only be able to pay it for 2 years. What happens after 2 years when you are no longer being able to repay the car? Then the bank will repossess. And maybe that is why we see a lot of companies, they fail after a certain time. And yes, there have been some success stories that it's more of they start you up, they kickstart you, and then thereafter, whether they've supported you for 2 or 3 years, then the guys are able to stand, on their own. But most of those companies that have benefited from stuff like that didn't last much. When they stop that oxygen, then unfortunately most of them fall. And all because maybe they're not able to compete with companies who've been there for the past 50, 30, whatever years that have been doing the same kind of business. And maybe the same thing can also be said about your traditional sale of your 25%. That itself as well, it doesn't guarantee success itself. And maybe this whole thing, Clement, should be on the premise of sustainability. Whatever we impact on, we should be able to sustain that.
Got you. And I want to take your calls now on equity equivalent investment program. That's what we're discussing on the show this morning. One of our listeners asked that we explain more about this kind of program / policy, because it's really been a source of tension between ICASA and the Minister of Communications. Makwe Masilela is a Chief Investment Officer at Makwe Fund Managers, who's been guiding us through this conversation. Let's start with your WhatsApps, though, that have come on 072 702 1702.
Good morning, Clement. Great show as usual. Clement, recently in America, TikTok, which is a Chinese company, was forced to give up 50% ownership to Americans for it to operate in America. Guess what? Elon Musk was one of the beneficiaries of that transaction. Yet the same Elon Musk does not want to see that happening in South Africa. I find that hypocritical. All over the world, if you want to operate, you must give a portion of ownership or interest to the locals. Yet in South Africa, we are told it's scaring away investors only in South Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why even Makwe was saying that strictly, so you can opt for equity equivalent investment program if you as a company, your own global policies are against this local ownership or selling that 25% stake of your company. But that's a strict condition. So it's not just that you can just come as a multinational and say, well, we don't believe in this. It's that, there must be global policies that actually prohibit you from selling that stake of your company. Makwe, any thoughts on that, what this listener is raising?
His point, he's on point, and as you are saying, this has got nothing to do with your feelings or how you think, it is what it is. If the rules of a particular country state X, or for whatever reasons, then you have to abide by them. And if it happens that you don't like them, you feel that, listen, you have been unreasonable, then no problem, you can look somewhere else. Not everyone will like your rules and policies. Hence, people would look at different things before they even think in investing in a particular country. So one of them is the rule of law, and policies of that particular government. If you don't like them, then that's fine. Tough luck, So yes, you don't just have to be forced to come in. And anyway, you're not doing us a favor as an investor coming in. You'll also be making money out of this whole thing. So we both need each other. So it's not a charity case.
Yes, I mean, he's going where the market is. It's not like it is a charity case. He's coming here to make money. And maybe his issue is it's the previously disadvantaged people that must buy that stake of the company. And I wonder if it was open-handed and it was more just sell 25% stake to South Africans, if he would still object to it.
That's a good point. You are right, and maybe it's objecting because it's for a specific group of people. And if talking about Musk himself, as well as they're saying that his speed is accessible, something can be accessible, but the question is it affordable?
Yeah. And then Kiamo on the WhatsApp line says, Clement, these equity equivalents are nonsense. There's already points for staff development and skills development and management structure comprised of persons with disability and the previously disadvantaged people. So why do we still need equity equivalents? So the question there, I guess, Makwe, is already within the regulations. So any company that operates in this country, there are still expectations that there must be skills development, that there must be diversity even in the management structure. You must, have, people with disability represented there. So why then do you still need these multinational companies to come in and comply with equity equivalence, or even, maybe let's start there with equity equivalence, because what that provides for already is provided for within the regulations and the expectations of any company that operates in this country.
And it's on top of what they expect you to invest on, enterprise development, meaning supporting small and medium-sized companies. And I think the listeners got a point. Because remember, when we do skills development, they're not doing me a favor. The minute you do skills development for your guys, the guys will be more productive. And if they are more productive, it means you've got economies of scale and you'll do much better. So these other things, we shouldn't think that people are doing someone a favor. I need skilled workers. You need healthy and skilled labor force to be able to be productive. So whether it was in part of the rules or not, as a business owner, you definitely have to upscale your guys and make sure that they're healthy.
Yeah, and there's a listener who's also asking you to clarify whether this equity equivalent investment structure is only exclusive to these multinational companies, or is it also for local companies? Like, can a local companies choose that alternative?
No, it's only for multinationals.
Oh, okay. So only for multinationals. All right. And then Kunjulwa on WhatsApp line says, Clement, I support the notion that BEE as it is not implemented properly. Here's my assessment. When the economy was unbundled back then, it was meant to create competition and to industrialize the economy to accommodate previously disadvantaged businesses. However, this never happened. It created a few billionaires. I was shocked when it was mentioned in the news the Nigerian billionaire Dangote has pledged to invest in SA infrastructure projects. I asked myself, where are the likes of Matozoma, Sehwale, Serobe, Motsepe, and others? Let's wrap up with this WhatsApp voice note.
Good day, Clement. With equity equivalence that is tailored for Starlink, where they say that it's going to help rural black schools and so forth. And you wonder, we already have internet access in rural areas and so forth. Starlink is not affordable to the normal South African, which is over 60% of us. It's not affordable to any of those people. So when they say the farmers and all those people, it is for the elites specifically. It's not for the rural black people. And if Musk was for the rural black person, why all of a sudden, after all the things he called us an a-hole country, and all of a sudden he now wants to come and do business here and they want to amend the rules just for him?
Yeah, hey? That is the question. Makwe, let me thank you, man. Thank you so much for helping us understand this equity equivalent investment program and how it is structured. Makwe Masilela is a Chief Investment Officer at Makwe Fund Managers.
Hanging out with Clement
On 702.
Let's walk the talk.